Title: The Shadow That Knocks. The Forgotten House. They say that in the heart of Ravenswood there is a house that no one dares to live in. It stands at the edge of town, where the fog lingers thick and the air feels heavier. The house is not ruined, not abandoned, but it is always empty. No one knows who owns it, and those who tried to stay within its walls never lasted the night. Some say it is haunted. Others say it is cursed. But all agree on one thing. At midnight, the knocking begins. They also whisper about the ones who answered, the ones who were never seen again, the ones whose voices were later heard from inside the walls, muffled, desperate, as if trapped within the house itself, the ones whose shadows still roam its halls, flickering in candlelight, though no candles burn. 2. The journalist's curiosity. David Halloway was not a man who believed in ghosts. As a journalist for The Unveiled Truth, he had debunked countless urban legends and supernatural hoaxes. When he heard of the Ravenswood house, he saw nothing but an opportunity story to expose yet another ridiculous myth. "I'll spend the night," he told the locals at the pub, "and I'll prove to you that nothing lurks in that house but dust and creaky floorboards." No one laughed. No one challenged him. They only exchanged uneasy glances and muttered prayers under their breath. "The house doesn't want visitors," an old woman finally said. "When it knocks, don't answer." David smirked, but took his leave. The house awaited. 3. The first knock. He arrived at dusk, parking his car outside the wrought iron gate. The house loomed in the fading light, its windows like empty eyes watching him approach. He stepped inside, flicking on his flashlight. Dust motes danced in the air. The furniture was old but untouched, as if waiting for someone to return. He set up his camera and recorder, then settled into the living room, notebook in hand. The first knock came at midnight. A single sharp rap against the front door. David's breath hitched. He waited, expecting more, but none came. "Just the wind," he muttered, though the air was still. He ignored it and continued, taking notes. 4. The second knock. At 12:30 a.m., the knock returned. Louder. He stood approaching the door. His fingers brushed the handle, but he hesitated. The locals' warnings whispered in his mind. He turned away. The knock came again, and again, and again. Rhythmic, insistent, demanding. Something scratched at the wood. The sound was slow, deliberate, as though testing the barrier between worlds. From somewhere deep inside the house, a floorboard creaked, but he hadn't moved. The whispering shadows. By 1 a.m., the knocking had ceased. Silence flooded the house, but the air was wrong. Then, he heard it. A whisper. Faint, just beyond hearing, curling around the edges of his mind. He spun, flashlight sweeping the empty room. Nothing. Then, he saw the shadows move. Not cast by anything. Not natural. Alive. A shape unfolded in the corner. Its form indistinct, stretching, reaching. Then it knocked inside the house. A slow, deliberate tapping. Closer. Footsteps echoed upstairs. But he was alone. The whispering continued, growing into a chorus. Voices overlapping, some desperate, some pleading, others laughing. A voice among them stood out, his own, calling his name from the upper floor. 6. The escape. That wasn't. David ran. The front door refused to budge. He twisted the lock, pulled, pounded. Behind him, the knocking continued. Closer. A shadow curled at the edge of his vision. The whispering grew, layering upon itself, voices overlapping in a chorus of something ancient. He turned and saw it clearly now. The figure standing in the doorway. Its presence seemed to distort the air around it, as though reality itself was bending to accommodate its form. The dim light flickered violently, casting its shadow in impossible angles that stretched across the room. It did not step forward, yet David felt it looming closer, an unnatural pull, dragging him toward its featureless void of a face. Its face was an empty void, its elongated fingers tapping against the frame. The light from his flashlight flickered, revealing something else. There were more. Figures, pressed against the walls, half-formed, their faces blurred as if unfinished. Eyes like hollow pits, hands that twitched with anticipation, a presence that had been waiting, watching. Then, a whisper at his ear. You answered. David's flashlight flickered. The air around him thickened, pressing into his lungs like unseen hands. The shadows stretched, bending unnaturally toward him. Then, another sound. A breath, not his own. Something brushed against his neck. 7. The vanishing. Morning came. The house stood silent. David's car remained untouched by the gate. His camera, his recorder, everything was still in place. But David Halloway was gone. No footprints, no signs of struggle, only the front door, left slightly ajar. And when the next foolhardy soul dared to enter, they found his notebook on the floor, open to the final scrawled words, "Do not answer the knock." But beneath the last sentence, something new had been added overnight. Scratched into the paper by something not human. He did. The ink was still wet, and in the silence of the empty house, a soft knock echoed through the walls. Then, something even more chillinga, rustling sound, like pages turning on their own. The temperature plummeted. A deep, suffocating cold that clawed at his skin. The air thickened with the scent of damp paper and something older, something rotting. A gust of wind that should not have been possible within a sealed house whispered through the room, carrying a voice too fragmented to understand yet laced with unmistakable malice. The notebook flipped open to a blank page, and before their eyes, letters carved themselves into the paper one by one. Who's next? The letters carved themselves with agonizing slowness, as if whatever force etched them was relishing the moment. The ink bled unnaturally, spreading across the page like veins reaching for something unseen. A long, deliberate pause followed then, the sound of something shifting in the walls. Not footsteps, not voices. Something waiting.